Stanley Kubrick is a perfect example of a visionary director. Putting an unparalleled amount of meticulous planning and thought into every aspect of his films, Kubrick has his hand in every facet of production for years to create an end result that stands very clearly as a work of a very personal and idiosyncratic design. While some might describe Kubrick's work as cold and detached, and it's true that his movies often lack traditionally sentimental moments, I think they are extremely evocative of emotion. One thing I feel that Kubrick is able to do in some of his films is draw the viewer into a state that could be described as hypnotic. Now, for the purposes of this video, I won't get hung up on the specific scientific details of true hypnosis or any controversy surrounding it, but I'll be using a more colloquial definition and focusing on the following aspects: concentration, focus, and suggestibility of emotion. Also, I'll focus on 3 films that I feel best display this, that is 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Shining, and his underrated final film, Eyes Wide Shut. Kubrick describes 2001 as such. 2001 is a non-verbal experience. Out of 2 hours and 19 minutes of film, there are only a little less than 40 minutes of dialogue. I tried to create a visual experience, one that bypasses verbalized pigeonholing and directly penetrates the subconscious with an emotional and philosophic content. To convolute McLuhan, in 2001, the message is the medium. I intended the film to be an intensely subjective experience that reaches the viewer at an inner level of consciousness, just as music does. To explain a Beethoven symphony would be to emasculate it by creating an artificial barrier between conception and appreciation. 2001 is considered by many to be Kubrick's magnum opus, and it's my personal favorite film of all time. But it is, at least at first, hard for many viewers to get into due to its lack of dialogue, minimalistic characters, and notably, incredibly slow pace. However, I had heard countless times how a second viewing of the movie, or a viewing with fewer distractions, completely changes the psychological impression the film leaves. The slow pace is not only intentional, but vital to this effect. Many movies, including great ones, are constantly bombarding the viewer with new information, which can greatly help a viewer keep interested and not have to keep focus on one thing for too long. But by removing this constant changing stimulus, Kubrick forces the viewer to focus deeper on each element. They are required to wait to observe every little detail about a moment, to ponder its meaning, unelaborated by dialogue or narration, and this, to the attentive viewer, can lead to a trance-like state. The viewer is trapped, eyes on the screen, waiting till the equilibrium is punctured by a sudden action. For example, the signal erupting from the monolith, or Hal's sudden ejection of Frank from the EVA pod. These scenes in particular are some of the most stunning in employing Kubrick's sound design, with the highly unusual silence of the vacuum of space absorbing us in the pure loneliness of the astronaut's situation. The only sound we hear is the astronaut's breathing, which makes that our subconscious focus. The human mind tries to synchronize itself with the film, and you may find your breathing even matching that of Dave Bowman's, as the slow pace slowly stops acting as a distraction and rather makes us forget about how much we usually worry about time. Like being in sensory deprivation, our minds are forced to focus deeply on whatever stimulus is available, and forgetting about matters of the outside world. We are completely absorbed in the moment. In the same way that the repetitive breathing synchronizes us with Bowman in The Solace of Space, the slow-moving docking sequence at the beginning synchronizes us with the rhythm of the Blue Danube and turns an ordinary docking procedure into an elegant and emotive dance. We are subconsciously engaged with what we are seeing on screen, which invites us to fall in awe with the spectacle and to wonder about the mysteries laid on screen before us. Kubrick's cinematography is also a vital contributor to this effect. Whereas 2001 could be described as a spiritual journey attempting to capture an idea of consciousness beyond human experience, The Shining could best be described as a nightmare, exploring the darkness and rage carried and repressed within the human psyche. This nightmare state is carried across from the characters and the hotel itself to the viewer's personal experience watching the film. Kubrick is famous for his employment of one-point perspective, and it is never more prominent than it is in The Shining, where we are greeted to countless wide-angle shots staring down long hallways and into geometrically symmetrical rooms, often in statics or pushing in. The leading lines in one-point perspective, particularly in the extreme wide angles Kubrick often employs, pinpoint the viewer's focus directly towards the center of frame. In this way, all of the detail of the room can be displayed, but most of it feels peripheral, with all the viewer's concentration on the subject in center frame. For example, in the Room 237 scene, where we immediately sense that there is something suspicious about the bath, and it locks us into it, creating an incredibly eerie, slow reveal of the naked woman inside. Once again, the music here helps. filled with atonal noises that confront the viewer and put them in an uncomfortable state of mind, along with the heartbeat which our bodies instinctively synchronize with. These elements bring us into Jack's demented mind and open us up to feeling what he feels in the scene: mystery, fear, then lust, and finally terror. Similar to the one-point perspective's leading lines, dolly-ins and zoom-ins are prevalent in The Shining, and constantly give us the feeling of moving closer and closer to the horror at the movie's center. We follow Danny through the winding passageways, the walls passing and surrounding us as spectators. Note here that the predictable addition and subtraction of the stimulus of the loud sound of the tricycle on the wooden floor sets us into a hypnotic rhythm. And here, in the scenes with Danny and Dick Halloran, the slow zooms when Danny has a Shining connection depict him being lost in a trance. There are few zooms going out in the film, but plenty of zooms and pushes going inwards, forwards. This helps us feel that the power of the hotel and Jack's growing madness are inescapable. Eyes Wide Shut is a film that is often considered a lesser Kubrick work, with one of the reasons often cited being the performances of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, and I can understand that perspective completely, but though realists they are not, I would argue that they work in the film's favour. Eyes Wide Shut is based on the 1926 novella Traum Nouvelle, or Dream Story, by Arthur Schnitzler. Like the novella, Eyes Wide Shut plays out rather like a different sort of dream to The Shining, an exploration of sexual fantasies repressed during daily life, and how they can be both intoxicating and terrifying, and threatening to the main character's commitment to his wife. There are other themes, but let's not divert focus. The characters in Eyes Wide Shut seem to all speak in a manner that is unnaturally slow and deliberate, and many have speculated that this is intended to emulate dream time, the way in which normal actions and thought in dreams can seem to progress slower. Life just seems to slow down, and rather than quick impulses, your actions and those around you can seem to move in a trance-like fashion. In real effect, this can leave the viewer in a constant sense of anticipation, with every word to be said seeming to linger on the edge of the speaker's tongue for unnatural amounts of time.
He glanced at me as he walked past, just a glance. Nothing more. But I could hardly move.
It's an effect that will either work for you or it won't. Similarly, the night sequences of the film often include long flowing Steadicam takes following Bill through his ever so slightly surreal adventures, surrounded constantly by glowing Christmas lights in a landscape which is intentionally not quite true to life, his hypnotic dreamscape. This is perhaps never more obvious than in the extreme blue and orange lighting when Bill comes home to find the mask on his bed. We know that this is not how moonlight looks, and it enhances the feeling that the world Bill is walking through is as much psychological as it is real. Kubrick's films can have a very off-putting feeling, but I personally find that once you open yourself up to being absorbed in them, it can be impossible to look away. His uses of slow pacing, dreamlike and surreal worlds and imagery, deliberate performances, off-putting music choices, repetitive action punctuated by sudden surprises and more, can put us into a hypnotic trance to feel the horror, the wonder, the desperation, and leave us with an experience that may not be warm and fuzzy, but will never be forgotten.